is anti-outsourcing to India. Now, one thing you must understand is that the biggest concern, at least abroad, America, Europe, in any country, is unemployment. If you go to those countries and you stay there, the press almost on a daily basis gives you the unemployment figures in those countries. And when you're jobless, it is a very, very major problem. Now, whenever there is import of services, such as IT from India, it in a way creates unemployment in those countries, and therefore I don't blame them, whether it's Obama or anybody else, to be anti-outsourcing of IT to India, because it is an immediate concern to them. You must understand that politicians will do whatever is popular for them, whichever gets votes for them. You look at the MNS in Maharashtra. They say only Maharashtrians should get employed in Maharashtra. It's the same phenomenon. Because the unemployment, we want locals to get employed. And if you find an Indian coming in from India to do software development in the United States, it is not a popular thing. And therefore, there will obviously be barriers and barricades that will try and prevent this from happening. So I don't blame him for whatever he's doing. Now, we are very passive. We are not aggressive as a nation, and that's it, both good and bad. Now, I was looking at the export figures of services, and I was stunned to find that the largest exporter of services in the world, in the whole world, is the United States of America. They export $540 billion of services in 2011. And I've told the government, I've written to the ministers, I've written to NASSCOM also, that why don't we highlight this? That you are anti-import of services, but you are the largest exporter of services yourself. But for some strange reason, we don't seem to take it up at all. Now, of course, their exports of services are engineering, design, the Big Four, and legal services, and so on, as contrast to what we do is computer software. But the fact of the matter is that the world's largest exporter of services is the United States of America. Now, talking of exports, which is one of the themes that I'm going to be talking about, the largest exporter in the world today is China. It exports $2.3 trillion, which is $2,300 billion worth every year, in contrast to India's exports of about $300 billion, which means there are 7 times larger than India when it comes to exports. I repeat, 7 times larger. So it's an amazing thing that they have done. The other thing I don't think we've understood in India is that when you are winning, you should win big. You should not win small. Now, India is on a winning streak when it comes to software. When you go anywhere in the world today, you say, India, oh, software. That's the first thing that a foreigner will tell you. So India is winning big. And when you're winning big, we should continue to win big. Now, we think we have done a great job if we've exported $77 billion. But I believe that there is a tremendous, tremendous potential ahead of us. The total market for software this year will be $918 billion. $918 billion. And the forecast is in 2 years, it will exceed 1,000 billion or $1 trillion. Now, 77, when you compare this market, is still very small. Now, we think we've arrived. You know, there's euphoria in the country. But I don't think we are anywhere close to the potential that we have. And therefore, we should be talking of much, much larger figures, which NASSCOM has been talking about. But I don't think the government is doing very much about it. So, for example, even foreigners, one of the two largest companies in the software field is IBM and Accenture. There are more employees in India than they have in the United States of America. You may be surprised to hear that. IBM employs more people in India than it does in the United States of America. You must appreciate the fact that India and China were at about the same level of per capita income about 30 years ago. And today China is 3 times that of India. I remember the first time I went to Singapore, 1963, it was worse than India, I can tell you. It was worse than India in every single way. Today is the neatest, cleanest city in the world, and it has the 3rd largest per capita income in the world. So it can be done. Now, the politicians will tell you that India is different, right? And they'll give you 100 reasons why we are different. But I don't believe that. I think it's a political failure. I think it's economic planning failure. And I personally believe there is no reason why we cannot be like China or like Singapore. And IT can show the way, and we have shown the way in the past as to how it can be done. The second great concern that I personally have is the poverty in this country. Now, when you talk of poverty, the international definition of very poor, by the way, is $1.25 per day, which is 70 rupees a day. If you earn less than 70 rupees a day, you're considered to be extremely, extremely poor. And the world statistics is that there's 700 crore inhabitants of planet Earth, as you probably know. Of these, 110 crores earn less than 70 rupees a day. Now, there's a recent article in The Economist, those who read The Economist, which will give you much greater details. In India, as you know, and Mr. Gandhi, I think, pointed this out, that there are 40 crore Indians who earn less than 35 rupees a day. 40 crore Indians earn less than rupees 35 a day, which is half the accepted norm of extreme poverty in the world. So more than 50% of the poor live in India. It is disgraceful. Now, how can this change? And again, you look at IT, because that's the subject that I'm talking about. If you talk of IT, about 30 lakh Indians generate $80 billion. These are all published facts. There are about 30 lakh Indians in the IT business, and the total revenue out of IT is 80 billion. And you do some quick arithmetic and divide one by the other, the average Indian in IT generates 15 lakh rupees per person per year. 15 lakh rupees per person per year. The average per capita income right now in India is 80,000 rupees. So the average IT sector is 20 times the national average. 20 times the national average. And this is what IT can do. So if you can double or triple our IT, it will have a tremendous impact on the GDP and the per capita income and the alleviation of poverty. It's very, very important to be able to understand this equation, which I don't think we have. I also believe that inclusive growth is very important, and people, speaker after speaker say that we have to alleviate the poor, they have got to get it. We hear trickle down is not maybe appropriate, but the fact of the matter is that you can only distribute what you produce. It's a very fundamental equation. If you don't produce, there's nothing to distribute. So the first emphasis, in my opinion, in the country should be to produce. So whatever it takes, please produce, whether it's crops, whether it's minerals, whether it's manufacture. You've got to put in policies where the production in the country improves, and I'm sure we'll find ways of distributing that to one and all. I have no doubt about that. Now, how do we counter Obama, and how do we get around the problem that he's creating and many other countries in the West are creating? Now, the reason, of course, is that more than 50% of India's exports of software come from what we call on-site services. What is on-site services? On-site services are Indians who go abroad to the United States or England or Germany and write software in that country. And this is something which is not liked, because the American who's sitting next to you or the British who's sitting next to you sees his job being taken away by the Indian who has come from India. And this is not popular. Unfortunately, 50% of India's exports still are through on-site software exports, and that is not a very desirable thing. Now, we were the first company in India, by the way, that was able to break this by exporting software through a computer link. In 1989, we set up the first satellite link from India to export software. We're sitting on a machine in Bombay or anywhere in India, you could develop software for an American company without being present in that country. And that is the kind of thing that I think we should do. It's very important to be able to encourage doing work from offshore. For example, if you go to the United States and you go to any shopping mall, whether it's Walmart or Kmart or anything else, and you look at any product and turn it upside down, you will see made in China. Almost everything is made in China and exported to the United States. But there is no reaction against China. It's very interesting, you know. Though the fact of the matter is that China exports trillions of dollars worth of goods, there is no reaction against that. That is because the Chinese are not working in the United States. The Chinese are working in China. So similarly, if we Indians can develop software more and more sitting out of India, I think we will have solved this problem. Now, one way to get around this, of course, is the SEZs. China has used the SEZs to the great advantage. They have hundreds of square miles of SEZs, hundreds of square miles, mind you. They're absolutely huge. And what can be better than SEZ? Because a foreigner brings in the machines, he brings in the know-how, he brings in technology, he exports the goods, and he finds the customer. So what does India provide? Land power and things like that. So there can be nothing better than SEZ. But we have converted our SEZs into land deals. So all we do is to sell land in SEZ, and that is absolutely incorrect. We started, the first SEZ was in Bombay at SEEPS, and there the government of India subsidized land and building to the exporters. Today that is not so. So all the SEZ development should be taken place by the government, in my opinion, and subsidized and not made into a money spinning scheme on the basis of land. And I think it will have a tremendous impact on our exports. I have no doubt whatsoever that that will happen. The other question we should ask is, why are all industrial houses, there's no exception to it, Tatas, Birlas, Piramals, Mittals, investing more outside India than in India? Think about it. You know, I've talked to the government and I've addressed them many times, and they asked me, Dr. Kanodia, you please tell me why they do that. And I said, please don't ask me. Go and ask them. All right, we have more potential, but the fact of the matter is that anybody who has any money and who's wealthy and has surplus invests more outside India than India, which is a very, very big problem. So we need to put in policies which encourage investment in India and not outside India. Now the subject is, what would I do to encourage software exports and to get around the Obama problem? And I have a 6-point plan which I will talk to you about that I think we should do. First of all, we should encourage the export of BPO rather than computer software. BPO is a sector in the software export scene. Why? Because BPO cannot be done on-site. BPO can only be done offshore. So therefore, when you export BPO from India, it has to be from India. You cannot send 5 clerks to Europe or to the United States to export BPO. Therefore, I have put in fiscal benefits, tax benefits, to encourage BPO exports. Today, BPO exports about 25% of our software exports, which is very small, but I would certainly do that. The other thing I would do is to encourage the export of software products from India. Again, software products have to be done from India and not locally. Now, you may be surprised to know that 25% of IBM's turnover, revenue, comes from software products, but it generates 50% of IBM's profits. I think 25% of their revenue comes from products, but generates 50% of their profits. So I would encourage the development of software products from India. You may be surprised to know, if you list the top 100 software companies in services, India has 9 out of the 100. But if you list the top 100 software license or product companies in the world, India does not have a single one in that 100, not one. So I would certainly encourage the development of software products from India for exports. Next, I would discourage on-site exports somehow to the fiscal system. I would encourage the development of software from India somehow through the fiscal system. So this is not the third thing I would do. The fourth thing I would do is to set up or to revive the software technology part scheme. Now, software professionals are not going to go to a village to develop software, because all of us are highly educated people and nobody wants to live in the villages. Now, the software technology park was a SEZ in the city, which is just 1 building or 2 buildings. And it was very, very successful, by the way. For some reason, the government has scrapped it, and they have told software companies to go to SEZs in villages, which will not happen. So I would revive the software technology project scheme that the government of India had. Fifth, I would encourage the software companies to sell in the domestic market. But ultimately, you cannot have an export market if you don't have a domestic market. It's unhealthy growth. So I would encourage the software market for the software companies to be done. Maybe I should exempt them from service tax for a start, not permanently, but for a start, and this may make a very big difference. I would exempt the dividends that come from the subsidiaries of software companies abroad. I have subsidiaries in many countries. Most large IT companies have subsidiaries abroad. But the dividends, when they repatriate from abroad, are taxed again. Though there is a slightly lower tax, but they're taxed again. I would make that zero tax. Most countries in the world, when dividends come from their own companies abroad, have zero tax. That will discourage people or companies from keeping money abroad and bringing them back into the country. Very important. Lastly, I can tell you that you cannot depend only on software exports. If you have to have healthy growth, we've got to encourage manufacturing. Today, only 15% of our GDP comes from manufacturing if we exclude mining, and that's very unhealthy. How do you encourage manufacturing? First, the Babu Raj must go. The Inspector Raj must go. We have the Inspector Raj, the License Raj. It must disappear, and we should come on it with a heavy hand. Two, and Mr. Gandhi has talked about that very eloquently, is the scams. The published figures in the press are there are 6 lakh crores. Now 6 lakh crores is 6 followed by 12 zeros. I don't even know, I can't understand